Hello and welcome back. I'm Benjamin Williams, and today we're still within the infrastructure section within Boson NetSim. Today we're going to be doing some layer 3 switching. So this should be pretty fun, a pretty fun lab. So let's go ahead and get into our objectives. So it says configure the D switches for routing, and readdress the network for routing. Okay. So it says for this lab, you'll be responsible for configuring all 4 switches. So we have A switch 1, A switch 2, D switch 1, and D switch 2. So it says P1 PC1 and P2 PC2 are PC workstations. P1 A switch 1 and P2 A switch 2 are access layer switches. P1 D switch 1 and P2 D switch 2 are distribution layer switches. The access and distribution layers are 2 of the 3 layers in the Cisco 3-layer hierarchical network model, which also includes the core layer. So this is our lab topology diagram that we have below. Like I said, we have our A switch 1, A switch 2, D switch 1, and D switch 2. We have our PC1 is connected to VLAN 11, and we see our interface VLAN configured on D switch 1 for 172.16.11.100, which is in the same subnet as PC1. And we have VLAN 12 interface configured over here for D switch 2. And we can see his IP address is 172.16.12.200. And it's in the same network as PC2, which has an IP address of 172.16.12.1. Okay, so that's just a little bit about our topology. So let's go ahead and scroll down. We have looked at all of the commands and the descriptions for this lab already before I started recording. And I looked at all of the IP address information, which is always good to have, and the VLAN information. We just explained that as well. And then we have our switch IP configuration and this IP address information, as well as this default gateway. So just great information to have handy for this lab. So let's go ahead and get into this lab. So we're going to keep our topology over here in the top left. We're going to be doing all of our reading top right, and we're going to be doing our configuration down here in the bottom screen. Let me refresh because this is not coming up in the terminal. All right, let's try it again. All right, we're able to see our CLI. So perfect. All right, so let's go ahead and get into our first lab task. It says on P1 A switch 1 and P2 A switch 2, configure the VLAN 1 interface with the appropriate IP address. Okay, so on P1 A switch 1 and P2 A switch 2, configure the VLAN 1 interface with the appropriate IP address. Okay, so let's go to P1 A switch 1. Let's do an enable, and let's do a show IP interface brief. Okay, so we see VLAN 1 does not have an IP address. So let's go into interface VLAN 1, and let's give it an IP address of 172.16.1.10, and it's a /24, so it'll be 255.255.255.255. I'm fat fingering this subnet mask. .o. Perfect. Let's do a no shut. Bring it up. Let's do a do show IP interface brief. Okay, we can see that our VLAN 1 IP address is now configured. Perfect. All right, let's bring up P2 A switch 2. And it wants us to configure its VLAN 1 interface as well. So let's do an enable. Let's do a configure terminal. Let's do an interface VLAN 1. Let's do an IP address of 172.16.1.20. Let's do 255.255.255.0 because it's a /24. And let's just do a no shut to make sure it's up. And let's do a do show IP interface brief. And we can see our IP address and our protocol and status. Layer 2 and layer 1 is up. So perfect. It says on P1 A switch 1 and P2 A switch 2, configure the appropriate default gateway. So we need to configure the default gateway of 172.16.1.100, which will be D switch 1 for A switch 1. And for A switch 2, we want to configure its default gateway to 172.16.1.200, which is going to be the VLAN 12 IP address on D switch 2. So these are going to be our default gateways for each of our access layer switches. So let's go ahead and configure that first on a switch 1. So let's highlight the right default gateway. Okay. Let's go over here. Let's do an exit. And let's do a IP default gateway of 172.16.1.100. All right, perfect. Let's do the same thing over here on a switch 2, but change the IP address. So let's do an exit, and let's do an IP default gateway of 172.16.1.200. 200. Enter. Perfect. All right, so we just configured our default gateways. So it says on P1 D switch 1 and P2 D switch 2, configure the VLAN interfaces with the appropriate IP addresses. Okay, so let's bring up our D switches. Let's go to D switch 1 first, and let's go to D switch 2 next. First, let's start out on D switch 1. Let's do an enable. Let's do a configure terminal, and let's do an interface VLAN 1. Let's just see what we got. Let's do a do show IP interface brief. Okay, so we don't have any VLAN IP addresses configured. So let's go into interface VLAN 1 and configure its IP address. It's going to have an IP address for VLAN 1 of 172.16.1.100. And it's going to have a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. It's a /24. Let's give a no shut to make sure this is enabled. Let's do an exit. And let's go ahead and configure the VLAN information, because let's just do a do show. Let's see what VLAN information that we have. Do show VLAN brief. So it does have the VLAN 11 and 12. Just wanted to make sure that that was configured. Okay, so let's, before we gave it an IP address, so let's go to interface VLAN 11. Okay, that should come up. Yep, just came up with that syslog message. And let's give it an IP address of 172.16.11.100 /24 subnet mask 255.255.255.0. All right, let's give it a no shut. All right, let's give it an exit here. All right, let's go over to D switch 2. Let's do an enable. Let's do a configure terminal. Let's do an interface VLAN 1. Let's give an IP address of 172.16.1.200. It's going to have a subnet mask 255.255.255.0 /24. And let's give an enter to that. Let's do an exit. Let's go into interface VLAN 12. And we want to give it an IP address. We just see our VLAN 12 interface come up. Let's give an IP address of 172.16.12.200. And let's give a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0 /24, no shut, just to make sure that it's up. Let's do a do show IP interface brief. Okay, so we can see our IP address information for our VLANs. Perfect. Let's do the same thing over here. Let's do a do show IP interface brief, just to make sure everything is looking correct, and it does for our VLANs. So perfect. All right, it says verify that each workstation can successfully ping its default gateway. Okay, so let's bring up PC1 and PC2. So PC1's default gateway should be ping to 172.16.11.100. And it is getting its ping responses. So perfect. Let's see if PC2 can ping its default gateway of 172.16.12.200. And it is getting its pings received. So perfect. All right. So for number 5, it says attempt to ping the VLAN 1 interface on switch 1 from PC1 and PC2, whether ping successful, why not? So it will not be able to do, I can already tell you now that they're going to fail because the D switches are not able to route VLAN information just yet. You have to do the IP routing for the D switches to be able to route between different VLANs. So right now they're not going to be able to communicate. So you have to do IP routing and then do an IP, an interior gateway protocol to let the other switch know. It'll be acting as a router at that point, so to let the other switch know about your networks, and then advertise them over through an IGP, which you can use EIGRP, OSPF, RIP, if you're using RIP, ISIS, etc., to share those routes, and then those PCs will be able to communicate. So let's just test that out. Let's do a ping to 172.16.1.200, and these probably okay. So okay, I didn't do the right. Okay, it says ping to VLAN 1 interfaces on the A switches from PC 1 and PC 2. Okay, so let me make sure. Oh, okay. I did them to the D switches. Just being sure. I was about to say that should not have worked, but I gave the wrong IP address. I was looking at the wrong IP address. 172.16.1.10 should be. There we go. So yeah, these pings are not going to be successful. Or even if I do 172.16.1.20, they're going to be unsuccessful, because the D switches are not able to 172.16.1.20. Oh, ping 172.16.1.20. Yeah, so even that is not able to ping. Let's go over here. Let's do a ping to 172.16.1.10. And these are probably going to all, well, they are all going to fail as well. So all of these failed over here on PC2, and all of these are failing on PC1. Okay, so right here for step 6, it says on P1 D switch 1 and P2 D switch 2 enable IP routing. So let's go to these switches and let's do IP routing. All right, and let's go to D switch 2 and let's do an exit. Let's do an IP routing. Alrighty, so it says on P1 D switch 1 and P2 D switch 2 verify IP routing is enabled. All right, so we can do a do show IP protocols. Well, no, not IP protocols. Do show run. Let's look at the running config, and we can see. Where is this at in our running config? Right here, we see IP routing. Okay. And we can do the same thing over here on D switch, do show run. And we can see IP routing right there as well. So we see that we have IP routing enabled. Okay, it says on P1, PC1, attempt to ping the VLAN 1 interface on A switch 1. The ping should now be successful. So let's try that. Do it up and hit enter. And now we are able to communicate with that switch. So it says on D switch 1 and D switch 2 display the IP routing tables to verify that all the VLAN routes are present. So let's do a do show IP route. Okay, and let's do the same thing over here. Do show IP route. Okay, so we can see that we have our VLAN 12 interfaces and our VLAN 1 interfaces. So that is good on D switch 2. And we can see we have our VLAN 11 and VLAN 1 interfaces connected in local routes. So perfect. Everything is good on those switches. So it has all of the VLAN routes. So it says on P1, PC1, attempt to ping PC2. Was the ping successful? So it's not going to be successful because we can look at the IP routing table right here and see that we don't have a route to 172.16.2.0 and that 12.0, I'm sorry, and that is the IP address of PC2. So let's just try it. It's not going to be successful. Let's do a ping to 172.16.12.1. It's going to say destination host unreachable. So We already knew that. So on P1 D switch 1 and P2 D switch 2, enable EIGRP using the autonomous system number of 100. So let's go over to these D switches. It looks like we're going to be running EIGRP as our IGP, or our interior gateway protocol within our autonomous system. So let's do a router EIG. Let me just autocomplete EIGRP an autonomous system of 100. All right, and let's do a network of 172.16. We can do a 172.16.0.0. Let's do a 172.16.0.0. And we can do a 0.0.255.255. 0.0.255.255, yep. And let's go over here to D switch 2. Let's do a router EIGRP for autonomous system 100. Let's do a network of 172.16.0.0. Let's do an 0.0.255.255. All right, it says allow time for the network to converge on D switch 1 and D switch 2 and display the routing tables to verify that the D switches have learned the unknown networks. And we can see that we have a new adjacency that just came up. So let's view our IP routing table. Now let's do a do show IP route. And we can see that we have this EIGRP. We have this EIGRP route to the PC1 VLAN, which is VLAN 1. So that is good. Let's go over to D switch 1 and let's do a do show IP route. And we can see that we have this network as well, which is PC2's network, 172.12, 172.16.12.0. So that's good. So let's try to do that ping again. Let's try that again. And now we're able to communicate because that IGP shared the route for the networks that it knew about to the other router. And now that other router is able to know how to get to that network via its next hop. That is good. It says this ping should be successful for the last steps. So let's grade and hopefully we did everything correct. Okay, we did it. We must have configured the network statement wrong on our EIGRP connection. Yeah. So it just wanted us to put network 172.16.0.0 and not specify the wildcard mask like I did. I specified the wildcard mask. It didn't want you to specify wildcard mask. Probably the same mistake over here. And it is. I figured that was the case. Okay, so let's resume the lab, fix this, and then go ahead and end again. So let's do a no. Let's do an exit. Let's do a no router. Well, we don't have to do that. Let's do an router EIGRP 100. Let's go back into that. Let's do a no network of 172.16.0.0, 0.0.0, or 0.255.255. Okay, let's take that down. Let's do the same thing over here. We just seen our that route that we shared. It just went down. Let's do a no network of 172.16.0.0.255.255. Okay, and let's just do a network of 172.16.0.0. Hit enter. Do the same thing over here on D switch 1. Let's do a network of 172.16.0.0. Hit enter. Wait for that adjacency to come up, and it just did. Let's go ahead and hit grade now. And we're frozen. We're frozen. We're frozen. And we're good. Okay. So we got everything correct on this lab. Thank you guys for watching this one, and I'll see you in the next one.